It's time now to make the drawers, and I've looked at several types of wood for the drawers and decided that maple actually works the best. It would be light colored maple drawers on light colored maple cases, and that seems to be the best fit. What I've got here is some maple that is 7/4. It's about 1 3/4. I'm going to resaw that in half so that I can use each side for either a side or a back of the drawers. Whenever I cut dovetails for a piece, I always have a decision to make as to whether to cut the dovetails by hand with a hand saw and chisels, or whether to cut by machine using a router. And I base that on the number of dovetails I have to cut. If I'm just doing a few, like say I'm doing a box, especially if it's thin material, I'll cut by hand because it's just much faster than setting up the jig. But in this case, I'm making 3 drawers, and the back corners of each drawer have a set of through dovetails, and so that's a total of 6 sets, and it's in 3/4 inch thick maple. So in this case, it's going to be much faster to set up the jig and then cut the dovetails by machine. Now I'm using a Leigh dovetail jig, fully adjustable fingers, so I can make the dovetails whatever spacing I like, and I'm using a router bit. In this case, a dovetail router bit for cutting the tails, and in my router. And I've done a sample piece here for experiment, and you can see I've got 4 tails, and later on I'll come through, change the bit, change the setup a little bit so I can cut the pins on the adjacent piece that fit in through the tails. Now this is a very dusty operation, so I've set up a backdrop. I've got a big thick piece of cherry here to keep all the dust from getting into my tool bin behind the bench. And I'll also be wearing, in addition to my earplugs, I'll be wearing a dust mask, and you can probably hear in the background the hum of my 2 air purifiers that are in the ceiling, continuously cleaning the air in the shop. Here you see the 3 drawer fronts that were cut from a single panel, and I'm going to be attaching these to the drawer sides using the Domino machine, which I'll explain in the next sequence. It's very critical that I get the spacing of these correct, and so what I've done is I've gone ahead and put a piece of scrap veneer under here, because that'll represent the veneer that's going to be attached to the bottom of the bottom drawer. And I put 3 pieces of veneer between each of these 2 drawers, one to represent the top piece here, the bottom piece here, and then a small space between drawers. And that'll give me a good way to mark exactly where these drawers are in the vertical sense relative to their sides. And then if I need to do any little trimming after I get the dominoes done, I can always do that. Now here I've slid the top 2 drawer fronts aside just a little bit so you can see the dust dividers here that the sides are actually going to ride on. And in fact, all these drawer fronts are set up differently in the vertical sense. Here you've got a good 1/2 inch from the bottom of the drawer front to the bottom of the side, but over here you got maybe 1/8 of an inch. So I got to go ahead and mark exactly where those sides intersect those drawer fronts, and that'll be my reference mark for cutting the dominoes. Okay, this part is very tricky. I am attaching the drawer sides to the drawer fronts. Now the backs, those are pretty easy because you basically had a back that was dovetailed into a side, 90-degree angles, no problem. But in this case with the fronts, these fronts are curved. This is a piece of, this is actually the second, the middle drawer front. It was cut out of one panel that I made, a curved panel. And I've got to intersect the side into the curved drawer front, and because the drawer fronts overlap the sides of the cabinet about like I'm holding this, I can't do a dovetail. So what I've decided to do is use the Domino machine again and cut slots into the side, cut corresponding slots into the end of the side here, cut slots into the back of the drawer front, and then cut slots into the side, then cut the side to the right angle, which is about 4.5 degrees, so it will mate up properly with the drawer front, and have the dominoes hold the drawer front to the side, and the distance between the drawer sides has to end up being exactly right to fit into the drawer. So to do that, I've made a jig here. I've taken a piece of medium density fiberboard and I have shaped it to the curve of the back of the drawer front so that when I clamp this all together, the domino jig will go straight on into the back of the drawer fronts at the right angle, such that the dominoes will then line up with the drawer sides, and we should have a good connection. This is how I cut the domino mortises into the sides. The reference face is the outer face, which is down. That's reference to the base of the machine, so that I get the same positioning of the dominoes as I did when I was cutting in the backs of the fronts. I've clamped the work down. I've got a guide board here, and I've gone ahead and lowered my fence here so I get a nice square support here, and I'll just line up on my line. I spent a great deal of time in the dry fit-up stage of the drawers. Here you can see the bottom drawer, it's dry fit, meaning there's no glue on the joints. I've got the dovetails in the back, and I've got the tenons with the domino, or the mortises with the dominoes up front here. And what's important at this point is to make sure that the drawer fits properly, because once I glue up the back and glue onto the front here, I'm not going to be able to reduce the size of the sides because I've got this lip here getting in the way. So I did dry fit ups, and the objective is to get the fit where it's very snug. See how snug that is? Doesn't move much, but I did allow about 1/16 of an inch of clearance on the tops because right now this is March. The wood has been in the shop all winter with the relative humidity around 30%. I'm trying to build this piece so that when the relative humidity goes up to an average of about 60%, we won't have binding in the drawers. And I ran the calculations and I came up with about 1/16 of clearance. And once I glue up the sides, or glue up the dovetails, I will be doing some more sanding on the sides, so that will loosen this up as well a little bit, so it won't fit quite as snugly as I have right now. Now, one of the things that I have to do before I do any glue up is to cut a groove for the drawer bottom to fit. I've already cut the groove in this particular drawer bottom, and the way I'm doing that is I'm using a 1/4 inch wide router bit in my router table with a bearing set so that the depth of the groove is also 1/4 inch. And I'll cut that around the inside of the two sides and the back, but I'll have to cut the groove separately for the fronts because the front bottom is not at the same level as the sides. And since the sides sit squarely on the table here, the reference would be all wrong. You can see how this particular side fits where there's going to be some problem if I just tried to run this around the router table with the front attached. So I'll go ahead and mark where the groove needs to be and then change the height of my bit so I can do that. Now the depth of the cut is critical. The material for the drawer bottom is going to be red cedar with the grain crosswise. That means that from front to back the cedar is going to change size seasonally, and I ran some calculations and determined that the maximum change in dimension would be about 1/8 of an inch. So you figure 1/16 of an inch movement in the back, 1/16 of an inch movement in the front. I'll still have plenty of meat holding the bottom if I have a 1/4 inch deep groove, and so that's what I selected.